You know, in the midst of this pandemic, all of us could use some fresh joy. And here to talk to me about her latest book, which is called Fresh Joy, is international speaker and author Heidi Mclaughlin. Heidi, thank you for joining with us today. I've been looking forward to chatting with you about your latest book. Welcome.
Thank you, Mike, for being on this morning. Welcome from Western Canada. It's good to be here.
We're connected everywhere. So Heidi, let's just jump right into it. You've written an amazing book, but what qualifies you to say that we can have joy in the midst of suffering or in a pandemic?
Well, Mike, I have been widowed twice, so I know what it is what it's like to suffer. But I also know that as children of God, we have a connection to God, that the joy of the Spirit lives within us, and that in the midst of our suffering, we can tap into that joy. Joy is the currency of heaven. It's available to us 24/7. We can tap into it, but not while we're in the midst of that deep grief, because that deep grief is just heavy in our spirit. But over time, we can tap into that joy because it's available to us.
Well, I want to talk to you a little bit more about that. I didn't know your first husband, but I knew your second husband, Jack. You were married to him for, I think, 21 years. And yeah, he touched my life significantly, and you know that story. But you call thankfulness the superpower of joy. What do you mean by that?
I do. And I learned that about 10 years ago. Thankfully, I was going through a hard time. Jack was going through gallbladder cancer, from which he was healed. And during that time, as I was looking for encouragement in the Bible, God kept taking me to all the verses on thankfulness. Be thankful always. Be thankful in all circumstances. And I decided to take God up on that. And I got a gratitude journal, and I started being thankful. Every day I wrote in my gratitude journal, and I found out that when God said, this is God's will for you to be thankful, that it's really true, because when we are thankful, it changes our perspective. We take our eyes off of our burdens, off of our feelings, off of all the things that we carry around in our spirit. We look up to the good things that God has done. And I don't know how that works, Mike, but it shifts our perspective, and soon joy shows up. And I call thankfulness the superpower of joy.
Okay, well, let me push the knife in just a little bit. You have been widowed twice. And just a couple of minutes before, I just finished teaching on the 4 friends who brought their buddy to Jesus, and he healed them. So how do you grapple with the fact that your prayers for your husband, Jack, because he didn't die right away. I took a heart attack, but it was 5 days before he died. How do you grapple with the fact that God didn't hear your prayer?
Well, we had thousands of people praying, as you know, Mike. Yeah. And I came to the realization after my first husband died suddenly on a basketball court 2 weeks before Christmas in 1994. I had to grapple with that at that time. And I realized that God has an upper story. I call that God's upper story. He knows the beginning of our days, and he knows the end of our days. And it also says in Isaiah that our ways are not like God's ways. His ways and his thoughts are higher than ours. So God has a plan for our life that is unshakable, that is unstoppable. And I just have to lean into that God knows what he is doing. And I have to trust him. And as hard as it is, I believe that God has a plan for all of our lives that we can't stop. And it's time for them to then graduate to heaven.
Well, Heidi, one of the reasons I think people need to read your book, Fresh Joy, is because a lot of people are saying right now, well, that sounds good for Heidi, and I'm sad she's gone through it, but she doesn't know what I've gone through. And you went through more than just that, the loss of 2 husbands. You also suffered with PTSD. And that's a phrase we don't even want to talk about, and yet so many people have been afflicted with it for various reasons. Explain to me how PTSD haunted you and what you did.
It did, because while my husband took his last breath, I was doing CPR on him while he took his last breath. And then after being diagnosed with PTSD, that's a hard journey to go to. And I know that we wish as Christians, if we just say 5 good prayers and read 10 good promises, that PTSD will go away. But you know what? It doesn't. It takes a lot of work. And I had to get some trauma counseling. I had to get some medicine. I had to get some healing prayer. And I had to have people come around me and help me and walk with me, and I had to be able to lean on them. So it's a journey walking through it. It's a hard journey of trusting God, using all the people God will put into our lives to help us, and then to move through that, believing that He's going to heal us, and He has.
Well, and one of the things too is that when we're going through difficult times, sometimes we don't want to come out of it and we say, why even bother with relationships? Did you struggle with that as well?
No, I didn't, because I desperately need relationships, Mike. I'm an extrovert. I need people around me. People energize me. People give me joy, but really good people that you can trust, that are loyal, that are kind and generous. Those kind of people infect us with joy, and I love being around them. I have many tribes.
Okay, I want to ask you one more question before we talk about the book. A lot of times people just feel stuck in their humdrum life. What's your advice? How do you get unstuck? Because now, as a widow for the second time, you have to make choices, don't you?
Yes, I do. And I found that if we want to get unstuck, we have whatever we want, Mike, we have to go out and get it. It's up to us to do that. So if I want joy, which I wanted joy desperately, I had to go and plant seeds of joy. And what does that mean? Well, first of all, I had to look up all Bible verses on joy, and I had to eat them, and I had to plant them in my spirit. And then I actually had to go out and give people some joy. I had to go and celebrate their birthdays, and I had to go and walk with them and encourage them. And by pouring out the joy and planting that joy, I got it back. And it's the same with generosity and with kindness. And even it's a good marriage, if we want a good marriage, we have to plant those things in our marriage, what we want out of our marriage. So whatever we want, we have to go and plant it so that it will grow and come back to us.
Heidi, you're an international speaker. You're available for conferences and speaking to all sorts of groups of people. You're an author. Where do we find this new book called Fresh Joy? Where's the best place to get it?
The best place is Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and my website, heartconnection.ca, and I would love you to buy it. I think it's a great book, Mike.
Heidi, thank you so much for being with us. You really light up the whole show. So glad you're here.
Oh, thank you so much, Mike. It's just been an honor to be here with you, and greetings to you and your wife, Terry.
Hey friends, don't stay stuck in your dilemma today. Experience God's fresh joy as you make those decisions that will change your destiny.